Good afternoon, and welcome to True Crime Mysteries. If you're new to the channel, hello and welcome, and if you're returning, welcome back. Today we're discussing the Canadian serial killer that plagued downtown Toronto for years, Bruce McArthur. Let's get into it. It was on October 31st, 2001 when 35-year-old Mark Henderson clicked the lock into his bike when he saw a familiar face, Bruce McArthur. Mark was a member of the LGBTQ+ community and recalled seeing Bruce in Toronto's gay village numerous times, and the two often exchanged acknowledging nods and small remarks when they passed each other. This evening, however, was different. As Mark locked up his bike, he saw that Bruce was jogging over to him, eager to start a conversation. The time was around 12:34 p.m. Mark happily chatted with Bruce and even invited him into his apartment to look at his Halloween costume. Just minutes later, things would take a turn for the worst, and the rampage of Canada's most prolific serial killer would begin. In Mark's own words to the Daily Mail, Mark said, quote, "I was unlocking the door when I felt a whack. It happened so fast, I kind of fell into my apartment and thought maybe part of the ceiling had fallen. I turned and I remembered seeing Bruce looking like a wild man. I can't emphasize how horrified I was. I felt betrayed. I realized he was trying to kill me." The sudden attack dazed Mark, and he desperately tried to get to his feet. So many questions were running through his head. Why was Bruce attacking him, and what had he done to provoke such a reaction? Mark fought for his life, weaving and trying to dodge Bruce's swinging punches. At one point, Bruce grabbed a metal bar and broke two of Mark's fingers, leaving him screaming in agony. Mark was able to run to the phone and dial 911 at 12:39 p.m. Operators immediately dispatched the police to his Toronto apartment, and Mark hid from Bruce, who was trying to pull out the phone from the wall. When emergency services arrived at Mark's apartment, Bruce had already fled. Mark described that he was laughed at by paramedics, who asked whether he had invited him into his apartment for an intimate time together. Shortly after the attack, Bruce handed himself into the Toronto police, bringing some relief to Mark, but his ordeal was far from over. Instead of taking the attack seriously, Mark alleges that the media brandished him as a street worker and that he deserved what had happened to him. Bruce had also tried to spin the narrative, telling police that it was a private matter between the two. The fierce media campaign to portray Mark in a negative light worked. Bruce was sentenced to 1 year of house arrest, followed by 3 years of probation. He was also banned from Toronto's gay village. As law enforcement would find out, this ban was wholly unenforceable, and the sentence of house arrest and the undertaking of a psychological assessment did little to dissuade Bruce McArthur's murderous plans. This first attack in 2001 should have sent alarm bells ringing for the police. Instead, it would later become a case study for the major failings of the Toronto police and their inability to keep LGBTQ+ people safe in Toronto and Canada. To Bruce, this light punishment signaled that he could do whatever he wanted, to whomever he wanted, as it was clear that marginalized communities were not cared about. Bruce McArthur, born October 8, 1951, to parents Isley and Malcolm, was said to have had lived a happy and humble life on his family's farm in Woodville, Ontario. Bruce and his sister had miles of land to explore and play, and it was clear from a young age that Bruce was not a rule breaker. His parents were strict and also religious. One of his former classmates recalled that kids called Bruce the teacher's suck, and never once saw him get into trouble. Starting in grade 9, Bruce attended Fenelon Falls Secondary School and was enrolled in a 4-year program. He got good grades and kept his head down, and those around him believed that he would have a happy and successful career ahead of him. At Fenelon Falls, he met Janice Campbell, the woman everyone thought was the love of his life. The two got married, moved to the big city of Toronto, and by 1986, they had given birth to 2 children, but not all was well. Bruce had a battle raging inside him. Whilst he cared for Janice, he did not have romantic feelings for her. He was gay, but within his community and his church, he wouldn't be able to come out for years. His family life continued as usual until the 1990s, when Bruce dropped the bombshell. When his parents had passed, he was finally ready to come out to his wife that he was gay. Bruce's job as a salesman for McGregor Hosiery and Stanfields took him all over Ontario. During his travels, Bruce began to have affairs and sexual encounters with men, confirming what he already knew deep down. Bruce and Janice continued to live together until the late 90s. The two found themselves bogged down with financial issues after Bruce was let go from his job. Following the separation with his wife, Bruce moved into an apartment in Toronto on Don Mills Road, officially starting his new life. As we know, in 2001, he attacked Mark Henderson, but had received little punishment. In Bruce's mind, this was a go-ahead symbol. Bruce wasn't the only one in the family who displayed deep-seated issues. Throughout the 90s and into the 2000s, Bruce's son, Todd McArthur, was sentenced to 14 months in prison after he made obsessive and obscene phone calls to women he did not know. John Bradford, a forensic psychologist, would later tell the National Post, quote, "There are some very preliminary studies that suggest there might be some kind of neurobiological disorder common to sadomasochistic mass murders, but it's far from conclusive," end quote. As the 2000s rolled through, Bruce went from strength to strength. Due to his white hair and beard, he landed a few seasonal jobs as a mall Santa. When not bellowing out "ho ho ho," Bruce owned and operated a landscaping business. His assistants were primarily young immigrant men, and some clients noted that his pool of assistants often changed. After a long day of work, Bruce would stalk the gay village, an area he'd been banned from by the police. Unfortunately, there was no way for this rule to be enforced, and Bruce was free to roam around as he pleased. In 2010, members of the gay community in Toronto realized that one of their own had disappeared mysteriously. 40-year-old Skandaraj Navaratnam, originally from Sri Lanka, had failed to contact his family or friends. Skanda, as he was lovingly known, was last known to have been seen at Zipper's Bar, a popular gay bar, on September 6, 2010, but he wasn't alone. Witnesses recalled seeing him in the company of an older white man, which was the last time he was seen. At first, law enforcement were slow to act, insisting that Skanda had left on his own accord, but his friends knew that wasn't the case. Skanda had recently gotten a puppy. He had saved up for months and months looking for a French bulldog and was extremely devoted to his new pup. Those close to him also knew that if he'd planned to go away for a bit, he would have arranged care for the puppy. When his apartment was searched, the dog had been alone for a while. It would take Toronto PD months to take the case seriously, and then, on December 29, 2010, 42-year-old Abdulnbasir Faizi also disappeared after last being seen in Church and Wellesley Street. Abdul left behind a wife and children who knew he would never walk away from them. The Toronto police found themselves under mounting pressure from the LGBTQ+ and Muslim communities to do something. Months after his disappearance, Abdul's car was found abandoned kilometers away on St. Clair Avenue and Mount Pheasant Road. 2 years later, on October 14, 2012, 58-year-old Majid Kayhan, an immigrant from Afghanistan, disappeared. Like Skanda and Abdul, Majid's gay life was a well-hidden secret from his family and friends. The police now had 3 missing men, all connected to the gay village, and it was time for something to be done. The Toronto police put together Project Houston, which saw hundreds of hours put into investigating these 3 disappearances. According to reports, Bruce McArthur was questioned, as he was known to frequent many of the same places the men had last been known to frequent, and officers also learned that Skanda and Majid had worked for him. The Toronto PD failed to uncover any evidence to implicate Bruce, and months later the task force was disbanded in 2014, much to the community's dismay. Just a year after the task force had been disbanded, another man would disappear, 50-year-old Sarush Mahmoudi. Sarush and his wife had fled from Iran to Canada as refugees and landed in Toronto. Unfortunately, Sarush would face many horrors shortly after his arrival. The Toronto police had a lot of cases on their plate. With the disbandment of Project Houston, They assumed that there would be no more disappearances linked to the gay community, and they were wrong. Just because no missing person reports were made doesn't mean that no one with connections to the community went missing. The Toronto police would uncover these unreported victims much later down the line. On April 30th, 2017, 44-year-old Salim Eason was reported missing. Like many other victims, Salim was last seen in the downtown Toronto area and had dropped off the map. Whilst the Toronto PD did investigate these disappearances, many would later say that their judgments and investigations were clouded by systematic and institutionalized racism. On June 26, 2017, Pride celebrations would take place in Toronto, and people from the LGBTQ+ community and their allies would gather in the streets to celebrate how far the community had come and what they had achieved. Amongst them was 49-year-old Andrew Kinsman, a well-established member of the Toronto gay community. 3 days after he had attended Pride celebrations, Andrew was reported missing. Upon receiving this report, the Toronto PD stormed into action. Andrew was a white man, and the disappearance of a white gay man was a catalyst for the investigation that followed. Many would later criticize the Toronto Police Department's decision and the fact that it was Andrew Kinsman's disappearance that triggered a full investigation. This time, the Toronto PD set up Project Prism, which aimed to uncover the mystery behind Andrew's disappearance and the disappearance of other gay men in the area. Investigators also discovered that the disappearances from Project Houston carried many similarities to those from Project Prism. For the first time, the disappearance of all of these men who had been sidelined were taken seriously, and it didn't take long for investigators to get their first breakthrough. In many missing persons cases, the first move is to examine the victim's personal life, and after searching Andrew's apartment, they uncovered a vital clue. The name Bruce was handwritten on Andrew's calendar on June 26th. The Toronto PD were familiar with Bruce, and that being Bruce McArthur. He'd already been known to assault one man in 2001. According to one report, investigators also discovered messages on BDSM and dating sites between Andrew and Bruce. Bruce had been using a screen name, but just weeks into their investigation, they discovered the smoking gun. CCTV footage captured outside of Andrew's apartment showed him getting into a red 2004 Dodge Caravan on June 26, 2017, after he'd been to the Pride celebrations. Investigators began digging through records of all red Dodge Caravans and eventually found 5 men named Bruce who owned one. Using the specific parameter of 2004, the Toronto PD discovered that there was just one Bruce who owned a 2004 model, and that was Bruce McArthur. The Toronto police quickly searched the name Bruce McArthur and found that in 2016, a surviving victim had reported him for choking them. After a record of violence and evidence, and he was the last person to see Andrew alive, the Toronto PD were granted permission to seize his van as evidence, but there was one problem: it wasn't at his home. Luckily, investigators found it weeks later in a wrecking yard in Courtice, Ontario. It appeared that Bruce had attempted to destroy the evidence by selling the vehicle. A forensic examination was conducted, and bloodstains and other DNA samples matched back to Andrew Kinsman and Salim Eason, proving that they'd been in Bruce's van. According to Global News, after making this shocking discovery, the Toronto PD were permitted by the courts to obtain Bruce's computer and clone it. What they would find would shock them. Bruce McArthur had a dark and sadistic mind, and his PC reflected that. After cloning his machine, investigators found folders dedicated to each victim and each disappearance. These pictures depicted the men both alive and deceased. Many photos taken post-mortem had been posed or dressed up for Bruce's amusement. The Toronto police were building their case and waiting for the right time to strike, which came on January 18, 2018. Bruce was known to frequent online dating websites and forums for gay men. There were whisperings in the community that Bruce was known to be especially sadistic in the bedroom. Many victims would later say that Bruce had choked them into unconsciousness, and they were terrified for their lives. On January 18, 2018, another unsuspecting man arrived at Bruce's home, believing that the two were about to engage in consensual actions. Without warning, the Toronto PD burst through the doors of Bruce's home and discovered the man who had entered just moments earlier. They found the victim unconscious, handcuffed, with a black bag placed over his head. The police had struck just in time, and then 67-year-old Bruce McArthur was arrested. Not only was he arrested for assault, but also murder. At this point in time, detectives did not know how many victims they would uncover.
Okay, sir, and your name is?
Bruce McArthur.
And if you could spell it for me, please?
B-R-U-C-E, and McArthur, M, small c, capital A-R-T-H-U-R.
Okay, sir. And right now, you're under arrest. You were placed under arrest this evening for the offense of assault, okay? You've been brought here 232 Division for the purposes of being investigated for that offense, okay?
Right.
So a few minutes ago, we just had a brief conversation. I introduced myself, and I gave you an opportunity to provide a statement, and you said that you wanted to do so. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And at the same time, I also asked you if you wanted to speak to a lawyer before doing so. I'm going to ask you again, do you wish to do that before we begin?
No, it's fine.
Okay, sir. So an allegation has been made against you, and this officer in just a moment is going to let you know exactly what that allegation is, okay? What I'm going to do to you right now is just read you a caution and let you know that you're being investigated for the offense of assault, okay? You're not obliged to say anything unless you wish to do so, but whatever you say may be given in evidence. Do you understand?
I do.
Okay. Do you wish to say anything in answer to the charge?
Mm-hmm.
Again, do you wish to provide us a statement
Yes.
with some clarity as to
Yes.
what happened? Okay. So just understand, sir, again, you're not under any obligation to give us the statement whatsoever. You're allowed to cease communicating with us at any time, but we're certainly giving you an opportunity to present your side of the story. So this officer is just going to give you an overview here of what's being alleged, okay?
So the allegations are that around 6:30 p.m. this evening, you met up with a gentleman by the name of at the intersection of Bathurst and Finch. During the course of your involvement with him, there was an allegation made of an assault, which in choking was the allegation made, and that's basically why you're under arrest today for that assault.
Okay.
Okay.
So, sir, if you would like to provide us with your account of what occurred earlier this evening.
Well, we talked about going for dinner, and he said he needed to take a shower, so I said I'd meet him at the Tim Hortons at Finch and Bathurst. And so he arrived, and we were going to have sex, and he suggested do it in the back of his truck since it hadn't been used yet. It was a brand new truck. I said, well, there's more room in the back of my van. So we went to my van. And we started kissing, and I put my hand down his pants, and he wanted me to squeeze his penis, but then he said he wanted harder, to pinch it, to pinch and pinch and pinch as hard as I could. So I did. And he got aroused by that. And so then I thought, okay, he likes it rough. So I put my hand to his throat, and just for a few seconds, because before that he's very strong, he just completely turned around and grabbed me by the throat. He said, now I'm going to show you what I'm going to do to you. And he had me by the throat to the point that I couldn't breathe. So I put my hands up in the air like a surrender, because I couldn't talk. And that's when he finally let go. And then he jumped out of the car. He said, I don't want to see you again. So I sat there because I was kind of out of breath. And I thought he was getting in his car to leave, because he started the car and it was running. I could hear it running because he was parked right beside me. And the next thing I heard him say, it's 911 or whatever. And so I thought, oh gosh, he's calling the cops. And so I got out, and then he got out and walked around and was taking my license plate and that. And so that's when I got kind of uptight, and I got in the car and I drove off. And then the more I thought about it, I thought, well, I should go and give my side of it, but I could not think for life where a police station was in that area. So the only one I could think of was downtown, but then I realized there's one somewhere in Eglinton, and that's where I drove to.
Anything like this ever happened before where things got out of hand?
Not like that, no, not that quickly, or not just like that.
Okay. Things have never gotten violent?
No.
No? Okay. So you indicated that, I think it was around 6:30 p.m. you said?
Yeah, between 6:30 and 7.
Okay. And you said you
I
met
think-
at the...
Yeah, something like that. I think would be 6:30 and 7.
Yeah. Okay. And you said you met at the Tim Hortons parking lot at Bathurst and Finch, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so it still would have been bright outside at 6:30, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you indicated that you were going to have sex in his truck, but it was new.
He suggested that, and I said, well, there's more room in the back of my van than there is your truck.
Okay. And what kind of truck did he have?
Ford something, 4-door.
Okay. And your van is
What? It's a Dodge Caravan.
Dodge Caravan? Okay. And you said that the two of you were parked beside each other, right?
Yeah.
And then you went into your van, is that right? And then you said you started kissing,
Yeah.
and that's when this incident basically happened, is that right?
Well, then my hand went down his pants, and he said, "Squeeze, pinch it as hard as you can."
Okay. What part of the van were you in when this happened?
Back seat.
Back seat? Like the back seat or like the very back of...
Well, there's only one seat. Actually, the seats are all except for one seat. One bucket seat's in there.
Okay.
So there's quite a bit of room.
Okay. And was there a possibility for anybody else to see what had gone on?
Yeah.
Okay. Why do you say that?
Well, because you're lying on the floor. Who could see you?
Oh, so you were down some.
Yeah, lying flat on the floor.
Okay. And you indicated that you started to pinch his penis, and he indicated that he wanted it rougher, I believe.
He said
words.
hard, as hard as you can do it. Yeah.
Okay. And at that point, you said that you motioned your hands up to his neck.
Well, after, we did that for a while till he was getting harder and harder.
Okay.
Okay, so I figured he obviously liked that.
Okay. And what was your reason for bringing your hands up to his neck? What was your understanding?
I thought he liked it rough.
The Toronto PD focused their efforts on 53 Mallory Crescent, where Bruce had worked as a landscaper for years. Crime scene investigators and forensic anthropologists were dispatched to the scene, and over the course of several weeks, they uncovered the remains of 8 men. They had been dismembered and buried. 2 of these victims, 43-year-old Dean Lysowick and 37-year-old Krishna Kumar Navaratnam, had never been reported missing. Bruce McArthur was arrested following these shocking discoveries. He could no longer hide his murderous tendencies. According to a statement of facts released by Toronto Superior Court, Bruce McArthur often staged and photographed his victims in fur coats and other items, both before and after they had been murdered. He also disposed of their bodies at the property he was working on by burying their bodies in planters or in a ravine. This document also revealed that Bruce kept trophies from most of his victims. In total, he kept Skandaraj's bracelet, Dean's jewelry, and Salim's notebook. It also revealed how Bruce used ligature or heavy objects to take the lives of these men. Once they were deceased, he would extensively photograph them before dismembering their bodies and burying their remains at the Mallory Crescent property where he was a landscaper. There's also evidence to suggest that Bruce sexually assaulted his victims before dismemberment. Mobeen Azhar, a journalist who covered Bruce's case extensively, told the Metro newspaper, quote, "His rituals were certainly grim. Bruce liked mementos of his crimes. He took pictures of one decapitated body. In other instances, he put cigars in his victims' mouths, putting them in furs, making them pose. He would move the body parts around in those plant pots. He would sit amongst those pots and eat his lunch with his victims." End quote. The evidence against Bruce was undeniable, and in January 2019, Bruce McArthur pled guilty to all 8 counts of first-degree murder. As Bruce had entered a guilty plea, the families of the victims were spared a long and difficult trial, where they would have to hear the cruelty that Bruce had inflicted upon their loved ones. Bruce McArthur was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for 25 years. Bruce has never told the police why he committed these crimes, or why he began his serial killer career at the age of 61. He is now 71 years old and won't be eligible for parole until he is 91. Many suspect that Bruce is behind many more disappearances and murders within the community, and the Toronto PD is currently investigating any possible additional victims. The LGBTQ+ community have been very vocal about the mishandling of the Bruce McArthur case. Mark Henderson, one of the first known victims and possibly sole survivor of McArthur, joined the Toronto PD in a bid to be the officer both he and the community needed. He left in 2009 and returned to modeling. In the aftermath of the Bruce McArthur case, retired Ontario Court of Appeal Justice Gloria Epstein penned an independent review of how Mark's case was handled. She has made over 151 recommendations, noted that the dismissal of Mark's report was particularly troubling. Well, that's going to be it for this video. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end. As always, if you want to support the channel, the easiest way is to hit the like button. You can also subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss my next upload. Other ways to support the channel are by joining my Patreon or channel membership. I also have merch available, and you will find all the links in the description box, plus a few extras. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter for more. But with that being said, thank you so much for being here and supporting what I do. It is very much appreciated. That's it for me. I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.